When a sliver of frigid moonlight in the deep night of ancient Olympus slanted across the marble steps leading to the Temple of Desire, overgrown with verdant lichen, the air was steeped in the faint scent of wormwood and the bittersweet crispness of night mist condensed by the frost. Within an inner chamber shrouded by heavy velvet curtains, where the distant murmur of the Aegean waves striking the cliffs could be heard, a man whose eyes reflected a profound sense of universal desolation quietly spread his empty hands. He was not unfurling iridescent wings to sow madness among mortals. Instead, within his mind, utilizing an inner imaging sharpened to an acute edge by eons of observing betrayal, he repeatedly ruminated on fate's philosophical metaphors of reciprocity. He was Anteros, son of Aphrodite and twin brother of Eros, the intellectual sentinel who chose reason at the zenith of passion, exiling himself to the mending of covenants for millennia. This is a chronicle of how restraint erupts into power, and how coldness is transmutated into nobility. The genesis of Anteros' life held none of the thunder typical of a war god's birth. Instead, it was a dark gray foundation woven from neglected solitude and extreme self-restraint within the shadows of the goddess of love's flamboyant court. As a deity destined by nature to counterbalance his brother Eros, he took charge of a microcosm that was ruthlessly cold, governed by the principles of reciprocity and the strategic game of emotion. In libraries reddened by the glow of campfires, he learned to use his gaze to perceive the logical fallacies lurking behind every moment of infatuation. This relentless, almost pathological pursuit of orderly truth became the first incurable fold in his psyche, and the only armor that would guard his reality in a world of chaos. He understood that sincerity was not bartered by prayer, but was a sacred logic that grew naturally from an ultimate respect for covenants. If his early years of watching were the tempering of his will, then the era when he decided to bring justice to every forsaken soul in the universe shaking great emotional judgment, was the practical crucible that pushed Anteros' aesthetics of restraint to its absolute zenith. He overthrew the prevailing divine fashions of blind forgiveness, resolutely transforming his scorching heart of retribution into an ultimate intellectual sacrifice. He sought to replace endless emotional tugs of war with prolonged rational calculation. In those quiet nights, where only the rhythmic carving of marble could be heard, through ruthlessly precise calculations of the human heart's geography and the purity of souls, he issued silent commands that stabilized the order of both the underworld and the mortal realm. At those moments, Anteros was the most sober and solitary artisan of the entire Mediterranean civilization. He accepted every probe and apprehension from Olympus with silence, standing like a marble bell tower, solitary and soaring, yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is manifested as the penetration of truth. Anteros gradually realized that as he finally garnered the title Lord of Covenants, amidst the expansion of civilization, he had obtained not just an altar, but a nihility that saw through the rise and fall of all things. He discovered that those imperial ideals, once so grand as to be hubristic, appeared, before the cruel mirror of emotion, as a fragility more potent than any oracle. This transition, returning from punisher to watcher, was fraught with intellectual struggle, yet it endowed him with a cold, almost translucent peace. He remarked in his final diary, "I once believed I was building the future, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of memory, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity, born from seeing through the transience of material desires, became his hardest armor in his final hours. Anteros' final mythic season was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. By then, the god of mutual love had become remarkably weightless from tens of millions of years of guarding. His once heavy black ceremonial robes now hung loosely upon his slender frame, or perhaps upon a will that had nearly turned to shadow. He understood that the age of order belonging to the ancient gods was nearing its end. In his final conscious moments, he requested the spirit winds carry him to the terrace overlooking the distant sea horizon, to listen one last time to the tides, a melody belonging to his inner self, with no audience but the void. He closed his eyes, tracing a final arc of completion across his chest with hands that had held 10,000 covenants. At that moment, the evening wind simply carried away the final sigh of this great recluse. Even today, 2,000 years after the myths faded, the name Anteros remains the sole sanctuary for many insomniac seekers in the deep of night. What he left behind was not a towering monument of victory, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and high-born departure. In absolute shadow, he maintained absolute sobriety. Amidst absolute temptation, he held onto absolute logic. Beneath the ruins of the ancient city, worn smooth by history, he maintains that posture of leaning his head to listen, as if still soothing this increasingly restless and anxious world. His life was an eon-long cultivation of deconstructing brilliance, an intellectual long march seeking sacred rhythms amidst the chaotic dust of the world. Anteros' story thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading whispers of the Aegean tides. He was never an opportunist seeking retribution for fame. He was merely a weary soul who yet steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. Inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. No matter how trivial your life or how deep your predicament, please believe that in everyone's life there is an Antaros seat of their own, a private space for dialogue with a self that requires no outward explanation. May Antaros' serenity and vastness become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you to the farthest, most tranquil shore of the soul. Good night, and may sweet dreams be with you.